Thank you, David. Kia ora roa te tātou te whānau. Ko Hāmuera Orupe Mcleod, tēnei Māori kōrero ana kia koutou. Me nā tino rangatira o te motu o te ao whānui me ki. Nō nai tūhoi tēnei Māori, ko au te tiamana mō nā rōpū Māori, o te Piringa, o te Awakairangi, mai pōneke, o te whanganui ātara. Greetings everybody, my name is Hāmuera Orupe Tūtaka Nā Haueruiti Mcleod, Joe Mcleod for short. I say that because I string along a lot of my ancestral names to my name to pay homage to their past, who have helped me get to where I am here standing in front of you. Kia ora koutou. I stand from, or should I say, I whakapapa tū, nai tūhoi mai iwi. I am the chairperson for the Marae Welfare Centre Collective, Te Piringa o Te Awakairangi in the Hutt Valley, Wainuiomata and Wellington areas. Te Piringa o Te Awakairangi Collective was formed a week after the Christchurch earthquake, February 22, 2011, with every marae from Porirua, Wellington, Lower Hutt, Upper Hutt, Wainuiomata in attendance with a support initiative by our kaitaka waina, that's Māori officers from the Hutt City Council, Wellington City Council, and members, officers of Te Puni Kōkiri. Every Māori entity rallied around together to throw their backing and full support to help our whānau and indeed the people of Christchurch overcome the situation they were in. I tell you, there were a lot of us here who were just busting to get down there to help any way we can. But those of us with a few marbles upstairs thought we were better than that. No, we can help them from here. There was chaos, obviously, messages getting mixed up, information not getting through to the right people, let alone our collective who were here ready to go. But our team since then have evolved and moved ahead regardless. I just want to touch on a situation that occurred when one of our whānau, he now called her, called us from Christchurch. She had a huge dilemma. She just lost her entire street, not house, her street, where most of her whānau were living. And there was news had got to them that an earthquake that struck Christchurch was huge, so big, they didn't know what was happening or what happened on the other side of Christchurch, similar situations that they found themselves in. She called us. She had 15 members of her family in Christchurch heading to Wellington. There was a need of somewhere for them to stay, so she got in touch with one of our committee members. She arrived, but her family had grown overnight from 15 to 35. She had apparently picked up stragglers along the way who were frightened, hungry, homeless, toothless, breathless. And just like her, she took them in under her wing and said, I got whānau in Wellington who have lots of room in their house. Well, they arrived. They were put up at our marae in Ngā Haue Whā o Preparedness. This is in Newlands, which was a welcome relief for them. Word got out that evacuees had arrived in our neighbourhood, and things just went ballistic from there. People found out we were in need of blankets, clothing, food. We had tamariki with us as well. And the community, the local businesses, they just chipped in. And once that message had filtered out through other whānau in Wellington, food started arriving by the carload. They grew to the truckload, and then after a while, it just got crazy. We ended up with so many blankets and stuff that we had to give them out to. We didn't have to. We gave them to the Salvation Army and to other marae in our area network. The marae did not have enough showers, so the local swimming pool centre offered their facilities for free. Free swimming for the kids, a lot of free stuff to help our whānau. Sadly, this fairy tale story did not last. An officer from the Wellington City Council turned up, saw things did not quite meet standards and safety, demanded our evacuees be removed. Solutions were offered, but these were thrown out. I'll come back to that further along. Another marae was offered, and the entire entourage were quickly moved to another marae in the Lower Hutt City area, Te Kākano o Te Aroha Marae in Moira, Lower Hutt, my marae. Yay! But along the way, that number had grown from 35 to 72 people because other whānau, since they had arrived into Ngā Hauewha, had grown. Were we going to turn them away? No. None of the councils realised who our guests were until we resettled them and started asking the councils for help. When our Kaitaka Waina Kaupapa Māori officer, that's our Māori liaison officer from the Hutt City Council, found out, she got in touch with Remo, and bang, the marae was officially set up, activated as a welfare centre. And from that point on, we got help from the Salvation Army, who just swamped us with food, blankets, warming gear. The list was quite long. And then the other social services started to kick in, WINS, SIVs, the police, housing. All in all, we didn't get our marae back till 7 weeks later. Every booking in that timeline that were with us were cancelled, totally cancelled. So we gave everything to the marae, made the marae be their home for however long it took them for the agencies to help our whānau, resettle them, rehouse them, or help them out with properties they lost in Christchurch. Not one of them wanted to go back. They were that scared. They just left everything, walked. And we asked, what about your gear? We don't care. When the redevelopment process started to happen, the whole house was crushed, everything in it. Some of it was removed, but not by the agencies. And it's now part of a hill somewhere in Christchurch. Te Piringa o te Awakairangi meets every month to discuss events that occurred since every last meeting to maintain our resilient status as a collective, for example, by staying first aid compliant, continuously upgrading our skills or upskilling ourselves in partnership with Remo, by staying active, maintaining civil defence and welfare centre exercises, radio training, community patrols that I'm a big part of with Māori wardens, expressing ourselves more, working closely with our local councils, government agencies, but most importantly, by staying connected with our national networks and marae business partners, mai te motu. All we ask our councillors is to support our group so that we can be that extra pair of hands that they are going to need, and support network operations underneath our iwi, hapu, whānau umbrella. We are good at what we do. We love doing what we do. We have been trained since we were babies to look after people, and we are trained and specialised in lots of areas on the marae. And a lot of us have grown to become experts and passionate about the things we do. With my professional hat, my training has around 47 years in the hospitality services industry. I am a master chef by trade on the mainstream side. Taha Māori, I carry the mantle for all ethics around traditional Māori food. I'm currently writing a book around that. Hopefully that'll be on the market at the end of this year. Some of our member whānau, sadly, do screw things up. They do give Māori a bad name, but because we are connected, they get into or cause havoc. It's a stigma we have to hold. Māori do get rubbished, they do get put down, but that is not all Māori. There are some of us who are doing good. There's one here. We do one Māori at a time. But we are making headway. Our group is so privileged to partner with the New Zealand Red Cross. I think Tony made a small mention that in an earlier presentation, playing an important role supporting and launching their book, it's our book, around psychological first aid manual processing. That book was blessed at our marae at Te Kākano Te Aroha in Moira last month, and it was rolled out across the country there. We are also honoured to be invited to attend emergency resilient workshops, presentations, with an eye reaching out to all our members to attend seminars as a tool and a methodology around furthering ourselves to better position our marae collective networks. We are focusing on Wellington at the moment, Why? Because our network works. Our collective works, and we are growing strength by strength every meeting we attend to build ourselves up to another sphere to better ourselves. I say that because we are guided with the blessings of David Johnson and his team from Massey University. Kanui nam hika koe te rangatira. High five. Last year, our group invited 5 kaumātua from Christchurch. I'm going to share this, who went through hell to give us first-hand knowledge what worked for them, what didn't work for them before the earthquake, during the earthquake, and what happened after. They suggested to us how we can better be prepared. One key recommendation that they did give us was for our group to unite and become a registered entity. We took that to heart. We're now processing a document to have our group registered as a charitable organisation so that we can move forward as a collective. It's a very strong support mechanism we have behind us. I entered the Piringa o te Awakairangi committee a few months after the group was established, as my skills were far better utilised in the kitchen where I belong and where I'm most happy. The heart of every meeting, of course, always ends up in the kitchen. It's called food talk. The heart, and over time, however, since then, the aims and objectives of our organisation have grown to include the promotion, support, fostering and encouraging of the establishment, development, maintenance and wairuatanga through spiritual wellness, tino rangatira, leadership and self-determination, and manaakitanga, hospitality by being a good host, that's me again, key elements to promote, support, foster, encourage, and to encourage our ties sticking as close as we can, ki te tiriti o Waitangi, by running our meetings in 2 languages, te reo tuarua, te reo tuatahi, and I'm so not guilty, I'm so guilty of that practice, ka pai mi. To provide financial, advisory and administrative support for all of our programs, trainings, emergency exercises, equipment acquisitions. We're talking water tanks, generators, hand tools to help us to be the first online at the very first minute disaster will strike our marae. We are so prepared for that, but we are not asking God to test us yet. But yes, we are ready, and our services to the community, we are there to support our council. We really do enjoy working with our councils now as a better understanding of who we are, what we are, and our objectives of working as a partner with the councils has now reached a point where we are friends. I say that in hindsight. I have a video coming up that I'd like to share with you. Te Piringa o te Awakairangi is involved in building community resilience and in developing Indigenous disaster risk management processes. This developing Indigenous thingy wasn't a thing we came up with. No, it's a system that's already out there. So we got labelled by that by somebody. Emergency preparedness and response capability is what we are aiming to do. The range of activities our group is currently engaged in including resource development, research, education and mentoring. Initiatives in each of these areas have been progressed through formal linkages with the Red Cross, REMO, the Wellington Regional Emergency Management Office, Massey University, GNS Science Joint Centre for Disaster Research and all of those other clever thingies, as I have mentioned earlier, and we do not intend stopping here. Te Piringa o te Awakairangi Collective member marae in this next phase, Ngā Hau e Whao Paparangi, is involved in building local resilience through community development initiatives. For example, we include as part of our training, rāranga o weaving, mara umu maru cooking workshops, that's what I teach, home resilience preparations and marae preparations and exercises encouraging the use of te reo Māori throughout. Then we have the development of community gardens with a nursery, the restoration of our whenua around us by helping to regenerate the land around us through planting, to repair our land against flooding, slips and all of those things. And we work very closely with many other micro-entities who share the same vision we have around what our goals and visions are. I have here now a short video clip showcasing the objectives and the programs that we currently have operating at our marae. Nā haue whao Paparangi, I now present to you our video. Sir.
Kia ora, Paul Rawiri. I'm chairperson or co-chairperson now of Ngā Haue Whā o Paparangi Marae. Ngā Haue Whā o Paparangi means the people of the four winds. Paparangi is the name of the area where this resides in. Really for Māori, it is a place to come to where people from all over New Zealand who haven't got their own marae can come here and implement, do, teach and nurture things that are associated with Māori kaupapa. What we want it to be here is self-sustaining. It's almost an holistic sanctuary for people to come to that involves everybody. It's not mine, it's not yours, it's everybody. It's Ngā Haue Whā. The two main things for the community here are the land and their involvement with us, both in civil defence or emergency resilience and with the restoration of the land. After the Christchurch earthquakes, we sat down with a number of other marae, were sponsored by the Hut Council, and we ended up with 10 marae dedicated to improving their standards. Not only have we tested our procedures twice, we've expanded to include the doctors, the pharmacy, the local community centre, the radio clubs, the ham radio operators. It is preparing the community to take responsibility for itself, so that in an emergency we can look after our neighbours, we know what's available, we can get on and doing it and not be a burden on the resources that will be required in a major emergency elsewhere. So we've written a whole lot of drills and that, but in an emergency you're not going to have time to read the book, you're just going to get on and do it, so that's why we train our people, and as people come through and move, we've got more and more people trained in how to operate this facility in an emergency. It started off the 20-year planning program so that we had something in the long vision to keep members here and to show the council that we were serious about what we're doing. First 5 years was to be Rāranga, the second 5 years we said would be Rongoa, the third 5 years will be Marae, and the last 5 years will be the eradication of pests. So it was over a 20-year period. However, when it went off so well, thanks to Ngā Whenua Warahu, who supported us hugely and actually set us up to succeed, Rongoa and Marae said they didn't want to wait to the 5 or 10 year period respectively, and they started on the second year, on the third year, so it went from 1 to 3 overnight, which tripled the work of the nurseries. Everything's been massive, but also the good thing about it is with the community are behind all of these as well. So we have te reo classes which teaches us about the names of the plants and the different methods and that. We have the elderly people and the rest homes at Kashmir and Aotea Hospital, and they do the planting of all the seedlings for us. We use the 6 local schools at the nursery, as well as the resilience workers and periodic detention workers down there, and then we use the corporates and the organisations like the Scouts and Guides and that sort of thing here to plant these plants that we've had from nothing back into repopulate and replenish the nursery. If you heal the land, you heal yourself and everybody feels good.
Kia ora, my name's Joe Mcleod. I'm the kaiarahi kai whakahaere kai whakarite for the Marae strand of Ngā Haue Whā Paparangi. We have 4 strands up here, Rāranga, Marae, Rongoa and Mara Tipu. The one I run is the Marae. This is the cooking part of our 4-strand process here, and I teach traditional Māori cuisine cooking, contemporary Māori cuisine, and in another hat we do mainstream cooking as well. What I've kept today is umu maru simple. We have pork, corn-fed chicken, a whole kahawai fish in there, kumara potatoes, vegetables and that's here.
So what we're doing here is everything self-sustainable. So everything that we require, we're planting here. Normally we have the Rāranga group. They come here on a Monday nights and they do their weaving and so on. So what we needed to do here, we said, right, let's have a 5-year rongoa or Māori flax program, and we'll do all of that so that we had all the materials naturally that we needed to produce things like kakahu or capes or pew-pews or kite or mats, whatever it may be. And of course we had to plant the plants that also gave us the dyes as well, so that we could teach people how to plant, how to nurture, how to harvest, and how to produce the products. We've gone from a rickety old building to having this whare completely refurbished. We've gone from having no civil defence emergency resilience program to having container loads full of material out there. Gone from having no money to money in the bank. Gone from having toxic land where we're restoring now, and we have programs operating with the community and the involvement of everybody around us. It's just stunning. The whole thing is community involvement in it. So by the people, for the people, owned by the people, naho e whā. So it's all theirs, and it's sort of 10 minutes from the capital, from Parliament. So to have a marae in an urban environment that can replicate what we were taught as children in our country, or in the country areas, is just stunning.
Kia ora no tātou. So that was our video presentation. And just to finish off, connecting to the work that we do here in Wellington, our whānau up in the Bay of Plenty Regional Office, Emergency Management Regional Office. One of them came to our marae, and we presented what we do there as part of our collective, the work that we do. And just going through to the video that you've just seen, this is what they would like to see happen in their region. I was approached a few months ago to send some materials to them. I did, and the outcome of that, 2 weeks' time, they'll be launching a marae civil defence product in that area. And I think that's going to be rolled out, mai te motu, sir? Yep. And that'll be rolled out nationwide after that. So, no reira rangatira mā, ko hāmuera orupe Mcleod, tēnei mihana tuki a koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora roa te tātou.
Thank you very much for that. Moving a little bit to the north on the east coast, I'd like to invite Kate Boersen to come and talk about a new initiative established in the last year around community-based science and coordination of information. So this is the East Coast Lab project, but Kate is better placed to tell you all about this exciting initiative. So, Kate, welcome.
Good morning. So East Coast Lab, what is it? What does it involve? Who does it involve? And what are we trying to do? So these are some of the questions that I'll be answering throughout my presentation. And I think after listening to Chris's presentation, I'm kind of on the same wavelength as him, and I've only got a few words on the slides, and so hopefully I'll be able to tell the story behind the words that I have there. So what is East Coast Lab? So East Coast Lab is a project that draws together a number of different agencies, and we aim to improve the R word to communities along the East Coast, to natural hazards associated with the plate boundary and living on the coast. So for most people in this sphere, it kind of means something, but for those in the community, it doesn't really mean much. So what we want to do is we want to make it easy and exciting to learn more about natural hazards and natural hazards science. So who is involved? So the project brings together a whole range of different agencies, and I think this is where the value has been in the project so far, is it brings together local government agencies such as Gisborne District Council, Hawke's Bay Regional Council, Greater Wellington. It involves civil defence and emergency management groups from Hawke's Bay, Manawatu and Wanganui, and it also involves a number of different research institutions such as GNS Science, the Natural Hazards Platform, NIWA, the Joint Centre for Disaster Research at Massey University, the University of Auckland, EQC, and last but not least, communities. So these are the people that we wish to engage with and connect with. So Why did it all begin? So, risk. We all deal with it in our day-to-day business as emergency managers, scientists, and as members of the community. We are all aware of the risk to natural hazards such as earthquakes and tsunamis, and our historic events mean that the public is also aware. So we have the community awareness. So a few years ago, there was a survey in Napier, and the community was aware of the hazards. They could identify that there are risks from earthquakes and tsunamis. But what they didn't have the understanding of was that only 17% of respondents were aware that an earthquake was a natural warning for a tsunami. And that is quite concerning in terms of that sort of knowledge. So, at the same time as this, there's millions of dollars of research that's currently going on. So there's the research behind it to learn more and more about natural hazards and how they might affect us. So we really want to leverage off this research. So how did it start? So in late 2014, Lisa and David formed the steering group, and together they brought a whole lot of people together that all said yes. And they started this project called East Coast Lab. So they applied for funding, and then I was employed, and from that we've got a few different projects that are underway. But again, it's not yet launched, so we're still in our planning stage in the early infancy of this project. So what is it trying to achieve? So we've got a number of different objectives. We want to foster well-connected and coordinated research so we can understand more about the plate boundary and the natural hazards that affect us. Our second objective is to encourage communities to become engaged and involved and participate in the science so that they understand the risk and then take action for risk reduction, which is our third objective. Our fourth objective follows on from this, and it's all around project learning. So what can we learn from the project? And so how does it plan to engage communities? So the communities are at the heart of everything that we do. We do the emergency management to get the communities to be prepared. We have our structures so that in an event we are prepared, but communities are at the heart of that. So what we want to do is we're drawing on existing and established pathways already. So I think it's more and more recognised that there's different ways of doing engagement, and we're kind of moving into the virtual sphere. So we've got our Facebook, we've got our Twitter, we've got our websites. But what's also very valuable is the face-to-face and the hands-on connections. So we want communities to remove their apprehensive and actually get involved and discover and take part in the science. And how we wish to do that is through, so they can take part and discover, and do that through citizen science initiatives. So there are a number of initiatives that are already underway, and we want to look at how they're doing that and kind of roll them out along the East Coast and make the most of the learnings there. So in terms of what's next for East Coast Lab, we kind of want to continue what we're already doing in terms of making the connections and from the different agencies, because that's already really beneficial so far. And then I guess our next step is to launch and continue what we're already doing. Yeah.
It's always very hard to talk about a program that is about or just beginning, so I would endeavour that you keep close tabs on the EC Lab, see how you can be part of it, see how you can learn from it, and as Kate is always willing to share the story and the journey with you. So part of the project is about how to do community-based science and how to connect communities. So we're as much learning about how to do it as well as doing it, so follow the space. The next presenter is David Wansbrough from the Ministry of Primary Industries, and we'll move to looking at some of the challenges that rural communities face and some of the initiatives that have been developed in helping, working with and coming from communities, from rural communities as they face adverse events. We've had many adverse events in recent times affecting rural communities, from flooding to snowstorms, but even other events like earthquakes in Canterbury had an impact on rural communities. So we'll hear now about some of the activities happening in the rural space and coming out from communities to manage these risks and the recovery from them.
Hi everyone, I'm David Wansbrough. You can tell I'm from the government because I have to wear one of these every day just in case I forget who I am. What I want to do today is talk a little bit about the primary industry recovery system because it doesn't sit in legislation, so it can sometimes be a bit invisible. I'd also like to invite your help to help strengthen it because we know it needs to be a bit better. So first, let's just start by just talking a little bit about rural and why is it different and why do we need to actually have a system that caters for the rural community. So according to the 2006 census, rural is about 14% of the population. So it is a minority, but it's not an insignificant one. And there's two characteristics that make up, that mean you need to think differently about rural. They're obvious: low population density and isolation. So those are two things that characterise rural populations differently from urban ones, and it means that we do sometimes need to think about them differently. So we have a rural proofing policy which is trying to get other government departments to think about, if you're thinking about your policy or your systems, think about those two characteristics and would they still work in those spaces. So we do have a system for rural resilience in New Zealand, and actually it's pretty good. Rural New Zealanders are so resilient now that they are actually sick of hearing the word resilient. So they don't actually want anyone to come and talk to them about being more resilient because they feel like they do that a lot already. So I'm just going to briefly describe 5 pieces of it so that you can get a sense that there is a system there. One of them is the primary sector recovery policy, for which I'm responsible for, but it is only one piece of it. We also have rural support trusts. There are 14 of them. They were not set up by us for this purpose, but they exist, and so we've been trying to use them to help build the process. As anyone in emergency management knows, use existing systems wherever possible. In fact, the third one in there is a little bit of a sleeper issue, but it's actually quite useful. Our tax and our welfare systems can be flexible when needed, and we often work with our counterpart agencies to make sure that there are some aspects of that are helpful in an adverse event. We also do quite a lot of research, and technology is one of the ways that we can be more resilient and prepare for and be, cope better with changing climate, changing situations, and to be better prepared. And finally, we do have a National Adverse Events Committee. They are in fact meeting next week. It brings together a bunch of government agencies and stakeholders to make sure that there is some coordination across all of that stuff. So that system exists. In case you're wanting, I've put some notes at the end of my presentation. I'm not going to put them up on slide, but there's a bit more explanation for those who want to download the presentation afterwards. So our primary sector recovery policy, we've just put up the graph on there. We classify things into three levels. They're not, the categories are local, medium or large, so they're not that tricky. What we look at is we look at the size of the event and how much impact it's having, but we also really importantly look at the ability of the community to cope with it. And more often than not, it's that latter part of the category that means the difference about, do we feel like we need to put in additional recovery measures or not? When we classify the events, we actually really would rather classify the amount of recovery that's needed, not necessarily the event itself. So people keep asking us, are we in drought, are we in drought, are we in drought? And the answer is, well, yes, we're in drought, but we often don't need to necessarily put any recovery measures in place because people are coping. So what we've put in place is recovery afterwards. I'd also make pains to explain, in this space, we don't do responses. So we deal with floods and windstorms, and actually volcanic eruptions are in this system as well because they cause issues for livestock production. But in MPI, we don't do the response part to it. We just help do the recovery afterwards. What are some of, and the other thing I'd say about it is it's not in legislation, so it can be a bit invisible, and that's one of the reasons why we know that we need to communicate that this exists a lot more and work with regional councils, local councils, and civil defence mechanisms wherever possible. What are some of the key principles in this policy? Well, not surprisingly, the government's view is that the primary responsibility for risk management lies with landowners and local communities. Now, it means that this policy has a bit of a hard edge to it. We don't provide a lot of help. One of the principles in there is that we really don't interfere with commercial activities. So where our recovery measures are in place, they are largely focused on the needs of individuals, families and communities, not on businesses. In contrast, the Australian system has paid out something like $4.5 billion of drought assistance to Australian farmers over 10 years. We don't do anything like that at all. We don't want to get the government in the position where it's the insurer of last resort. We want to make sure that our assistance is appropriate to the size of the event and that the government is acting fairly. Interestingly, we also have international obligations. So we can't just go and assist some of our industries that are large exporter industries, because that can actually trigger some international obligations about unfair supporting and distorting international markets. Part of our system is the rural support trusts. There are 14 of them. Quite a lot of them existed before we invented the recovery policy. So they have their own existence. They're independent, they're charitable trusts. Some of them we have created or encouraged to create after the rural recovery policy was put in place to make sure that the whole country was covered. So they don't align with regional council boundaries. They're close, but not quite. And they are largely people who have kind of been involved in rural communities or the farming industries for a long time, and they are staffed and run by people who are very well connected in their communities and well respected in their communities. But as I said, they are volunteer organisations, they are charitable organisations. We give them a bit of running money, but it's of the order of $10,000 a year per trust, so it's not a lot. We do top that up when there are adverse events like droughts or floods so that they can run some activities. But it's largely focused on pastoral care and sort of a resilience aspect. We really keep out of supporting commercial things, although we do encourage the industries and some of the communities to put in place commercial measures so that they're managing their own risks. I did say that the tax and the welfare systems can be flexible as well. So there are some schemes like income equalisation that allows businesses to carry their income and distribute it over many years rather than just have to do it according to a tax calendar, because some of our industries, the cycles are longer than 12 months. We also can put in place rural assistance payments, because one of the issues with the welfare system is that if you're farming through a flood or a drought, you still need to run the business to feed animals and keep your production system going. And there's often quite a high income and asset base that means that people are not necessarily eligible for some of the welfare needs. But rural assistance payments are really at desperate needs ends. Even through the current Canterbury drought, the number of people taking that up is less than 20. So it's not a lot of assistance there. We also do quite a lot of research. So this is on, there's a website called Mcleod. It is only one of the examples of research we do. I know there's a national science challenge about resilient communities, but there's a whole heap of research that's been coordinated and put into one place, and it's largely sort of thinking about climate change adaptability, but it's some useful tips about how to recover pasture after a flood, what sort of forage can you grow that's more drought resilient and more drought tolerant. So a whole lot of information is there. It's divided by sectors and it's divided by various different types of activities as well. And finally, of course, we wouldn't have a government system without a committee. So we have a National Adverse Events Committee. We do have quite a range of stakeholders on it, so we do chair it, but we've got some government departments on there. We also have some community-based groups like the Rural Support Trusts and Rural Women. So obviously the industry groups are there, Federated Farmers, Dairy New Zealand, Beef and Lamb are the ones that we deal with a lot. Veterinary Association is there as well, because there's often a link between dealing with adverse events, and actually there are animal welfare issues that pop out of it as well. The bankers are there because they have a really important role as well. And of course NIWA is part of it. Part of being more resilient and more ready for it is to actually have really good long-term forecasts and arrangements. So finally, kind of where are we going with this? We do think about recovery as in parallel to response. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody here. It's an interesting conversation within our organisation. We have other parts of MPI that do a lot of responses to biosecurity or food safety issues, and we keep trying to make sure, remind them that there is a recovery element as well. It's not all about responding, and to build in that to improve our welfare systems and make sure that they become part of recovery as well. And my challenge and request for you for what we need for help is that we need better integration with the civil defence mechanisms. We are not resourced to do this at local and regional levels, and we won't be doing it. We will be acting at the national levels. But locally, we really want civil defence and regional council systems to have some sort of rural network built up before you need to rely on it. And so that's our request, is we would like to see more rural groups that bring together some of the existing networks and existing people who are out there to build that community resilience before we need it. And that's all. Thank you.
And another challenge to the sector. So thank you very much for that presentation. And I think it's once again showing the interconnectedness of what we're doing within various groups, both rural and urban, connecting through the structures. So thank you for that. The next presentation is looking at the contribution from the service sector, the service organisations. And Craig Horrocks is from Rotary in Auckland and will give an overview of some of the work that they've been doing. But I think he'll start off by seeing the context for Rotary and its possible and future roles and extended roles in the disaster risk reduction space. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm here to tell you two things. One, which probably many of you in the room would know, a little bit about Rotary, and number two, a bit about our current journey with assisting in the disaster management space. So first of all, just go back. Right. So Rotary it was founded in 1905. We're in good health. We're 1.2 million members, around 31,000 clubs spread around the world. Disaster relief does fall within Rotary's very important 6 areas of focus, which are up on the board there. Sorry, this is timed. So, that's important because disaster relief qualifies our clubs to gain access to our whole international funding organisation. Now, just coming back to Rotary and as an NGO, we're purely volunteer-based. And when we're involved in an area such as the disaster relief, we are taking the advantage of people giving their time. So I think it's very important, if you're engaging with an NGO such as Rotary, to perhaps understand that the attitude of a Rotarian is that they really have 3 things to give. They have, first and most important, their time, secondly, their money, and thirdly, they have their friendships. People join a community organisation like Rotary because, as the research shows, they join to change their own lives, but in fact they only stay if their lives change. And that's a very important metric for us because it actually requires us to deliver on those expectations. So we're involved in a wide variety of activities as a non-political, non-religious NGO. So if I come back here on the slide, we started off with the usual process of becoming aware, particularly with events like Japan. And the awareness question that was debated within Rotary as well, we're very heavily involved in disaster relief, but what are we doing to help prepare our own communities? So from that awareness and taking our Rotary clubs and their current activities, and you can see on the slide here, we have an international group involved in disaster relief, a Rotary Action Group, which I'll come back to in a moment, and we have also the Rotary New Zealand World Community Service, which many of you who have worked in the islands would be familiar with, and the program that we have there of funding, creating, shipping, and placing in communities these emergency response kits, or in Rotary language, ERCs. We also have our partnership with the charity Shelter Box, which was founded by Rotarians. So from moving from that focus to the reality check, as I titled this paper, we looked at what we were doing on the ground with our local communities. Now, our clubs in our zone, we have over 200 clubs. We have around 8,000 members. And what we did was we identified that there was a very low understanding amongst our own people about the awareness and preparation. So with the Rotary Club of Orewa, we ran a pop-up community centre in August last year with Massey University, and we had members of the Auckland CDM team there. And essentially what we did was we just had big screens showing footage from Japan. We had the inundation maps, and we had people who were there to answer questions. As a result of that, the CDM picked that up and followed that on, and the latest is last week's Orewa Big Walk and the evacuation exercise, where you can see the photograph on the slide. Rotary, as many of you would know, has had a long history of when it's seen a long-term community need of establishing a method of addressing that beyond the clubs. The clubs have their own rhythm and life, and build heavily on friendship and local communities. And so we've set up a charity called Chip In. We've got a lot of experience in doing that. We set up Cure Kids, we set up CSS Disability. Those things have been established and then set free. So this is very annoying that it's self-timing itself. The next actions for Chip In and Rotary is, thank you, if you could change that, it'd be great, is to do some follow-up research in the community using our local Rotary Club and some of our interactors. They're at secondary school. The Auckland Grammar Interact Club is going to be heavily involved, together with some of the other Interact clubs, and our Rotaractors, who are young professionals. So we intend to do some follow-up surveys and research. Those will be in-depth in the community. Our objective, we can see from here, is to actually follow on from the work that was done with the Orewa Walk to sustain the conversation. And during the walk, we had a number of Rotarians out in the community asking people, well, were you aware? Are you going on the walk? And one of there was a women's group that were walking around, and this woman said, well, I am not going on the walk, I'm aware of it, but I need to find out how to skedaddle up that mountain. So we've decided that we're going to call it skedaddling. So we want to see these groups that go out walking in the morning trying to actually repeat the pattern of the Orewa Walk, get the knowledge about the paths out there in a more sustainable way, and also just building some wisdom about the actual barriers. And of course, you've already heard from Chris about his view of Ariwa and the issues that we have there with people who are unable to self-evacuate. We definitely are being asked by the rest of the Rotary community to assist in other communities in creating this conversation. And our intention is to power up our sponsor and donor network to walk the talk. So from here, just coming back to Rotary. Rotary, I'm very sorry to tell you, I am not a member of the Illuminati, and I do not have a secret handshake. And if I did, I wouldn't be extending it to my district governor nominee, Mitch Brown down there, because he would reject the handshake immediately. But there's a lot of confusion about NGOs. You know, why are you there? What are you doing? And what I did want to I have mentioned to you the individual Rotarian's motivation. The individual Rotarian's motivation is very much founded in that desire to change their own lives, and then sustained in the fact that they find things which involve them in their local community or more broadly in, for instance, the polio program. Now, the Power of One, which is often talked about, is a great example of polio. I don't know whether many of you are aware, but the Polio Plus program, where we've inoculated over 1.3, 1.4 billion children, is a Rotary program. It's run in conjunction with WHO, but in fact, the recent huge progress we've made has been accelerated by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who have given us so far $452 million to continue the inoculation program. We've only got 2 countries, and if you search on it, you'll see that there are people with 2 fingers up. We've only got 2 countries left. It'll be the second disease, and if most people in this room probably have never met someone who's had polio, but it's a terrible, horrible, crippling disease. And if we succeed in getting rid of polio in Afghanistan and Pakistan, then the world will be a better place. We are seeing the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is very keen for Rotary to continue that work with malaria and other mosquito-borne viruses, and obviously we now have the Zika crisis. Of the 6 areas of focus, one of the areas that I personally am very interested in is peace. We don't seem to be making a hell of a lot of progress at the moment on peace. It's a very troubled world. But just talking about Rotary's DNA, we were responsible for bringing together 21 countries at the end of the war, and that had been preceded in a meeting in London during the war when Rotarians were trying to encourage the international community to think about how the peace could be sustained. In 1945, Rotary was asked to provide consultants to the UN. We were one of only 2 NGOs that were actually part of the formation of the UN. We've continued that work, and it's in our DNA, and we have, as you can see there, centres where we have over 100 Peace Fellows every year in our universities around the world where we have Peace Fellowships. So peace and disaster management, when we have dislocation, when we have the scenes that we're seeing on our TVs today of people who are dispossessed or moved because of war, because of disaster, then civil unrest can follow, and obviously Rotary is very interested in maintaining a civil society. And just the next slide just shows you one of the things that is very interesting. We've got a lot of studies on peace as a result of the academic work, and this slide just talks about why peace is good economics as against bad economics. We can, out of disaster, show that in fact we can't necessarily avoid these things, but we can actually make a difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And just building on one of the other talks yesterday, disaster risk reduction is good economics too. So we welcome the involvement of NGOs, and I think there are many opportunities both within Rotary but other service clubs as well to get them involved. Many of them are involved in your community programs, and it's around sharing the opportunities and finding new ways for them to be involved. So we thank Rotary for their efforts and Craig for his presentation. So the last presentation now, and it's really close to my heart as a researcher, was to see science playing a greater role. And we saw in the Sendai process the elevation of science and technology and the information base from what we had before lifted up as the evidence base for the practice for disaster risk reduction. I'm also passionate about getting young New Zealanders interested in science as well, and it provides an opportunity, but often science is in a context. So once again, I'm also believe that as we build resilient communities, there are opportunities for young people to be engaged in the science of disaster risk reduction at a community level. So I take the opportunity now to invite Victoria Metcalf, who's works for the Office of the Chief Science Advisor to the Prime Minister. She'll tell you more about her programs, but it's really around encouraging increased young people's participation in science, and maybe my call is to see how we can enable that within the disaster risk reduction, disaster risk management space of getting young people. And the Minister's announcement yesterday for youth to be involved, maybe there's a role for the connection between young people participating in disaster risk reduction, emergency management, but also the role of science in that with youth. So I invite Victoria to come and present.
Thank you. Great pleasure to be here. So, possibly like many of you, I had a childhood that was based on exploring the great outdoors, going on walks, exploring all sorts of places, the beach, going fishing. Is that similar for many of you? It was about being curious, wasn't it? And asking questions of your parents, your wider family, your siblings, and really just investigating the natural world and the physical world. So we want to tap into that same lifelong curiosity and have that happening across communities on a sustained basis. And so I now have this really amazing job where I have this ridiculously long job title, but I got a school class to rename my job title, and they came up with the title Queen of Curiosity. And so I'm very fortunate now to be going out amongst communities and really trying to inspire this community-based participation in science. Before we get into that exploration of the program, I just want to ask a question. Does anyone have an answer to who is a scientist? No, it's right before lunch, so it's tricky. Yep. Everyone. So usually it takes quite a few iterations to get to the everyone point, but that is exactly the point I'm trying to make, is that I believe fundamentally everyone is a scientist within and has the capability to keep using science given the appropriate support throughout their lives. What's our stereotype of a scientist though? The man scientist, someone said. The mad and maybe the mad and man scientist. So that's still very true today, but we hope through the platform that I'm running that we're going to start changing that perception and make sure that young people are also perceiving themselves as scientists as well and their wider whānau. So now I want you to imagine this scenario. I want you to imagine that there's a community group out there who have an idea of something that they would like to do that involves some kind of science being done. And it may have a school at the heart of that group, or it may be a trust or an NGO or something else like that. So they have this idea, but they need some support, some help to make it happen. So they go to an organisation within their region who's responsible for listening to these ideas and subsequently handing out funding. And their first idea is found to have merit, but they need some scientist support to make it happen. And so if they don't have that support already, there's a bit of a matchmaking and mentoring process that goes on to provide the extra expertise and the educational expertise as well. And they put together an application and they submit it back to the same organisation who mentors them all the way through that process. Really close association. Their application is found to be fantastic, and they're given a small pot of cash to go and make this community-based science project happen. And it's the start of a lasting long-term relationship between the community, the school and the community, or schools, and the scientists who have partnered up. Imagine what an awesome way of doing science and also doing community-based activities that would be. And that's the platform that we now have being piloted in New Zealand, and it sits under this framework of something called a Nation of Curious Minds. And the wider brand now is called Curious Minds, which is the logo you see up the top left. And there's a few different components to a Nation of Curious Minds, but the piece I just described is something called the Participatory Science Platform, or PSP for short. Why do we want this kind of approach being trialled in New Zealand? What's the benefit of this? Well, certainly as for someone outside the emergency management space, it's been really interesting to hear discussion of all these different areas that I'm not that familiar with, but how I can think about how some science involvement, and this is something David alluded to as well, is really central to many of these global problems that we face. And yet we know that we also, to be able to tackle them adequately, we need to lift our science literacy, especially amongst young New Zealanders, so that they have a really bright future. And furthermore, that sort of leads to an end goal where we have a scientifically engaged society building a better, brighter New Zealand. So what are the various ways to go about this? And we had some really interesting talks about engagement this morning. And there's lots of pieces in those talks that are really relevant to what we're doing as well. We're sort of familiar with science reaching large audiences through things like YouTube channels, through TV series, through magazine articles, something like National Geographic Channel. Now, these are all great. They get to large audiences, they get to a worldwide audience, and they can help us bring science to the masses. But there's a difference between large reach and whether there's sort of a call to action or an increased understanding as a result. And so we know now that those measures are good, but they may not lead to true engagement, which we describe as a change in behaviour around science. And so what can be better is a less is more approach. And this is where citizen science, which is what Kate was talking to you about with her East Coast Lab project, also has a place. So citizen science is where citizens are involved in a science project. And there are various ways that this can happen. Often it's about people coming to a particular place on a particular day. They might be counting things, they might be helping build something, they could be assessing hazards, for example, or they might be sitting at home on their computers helping to crunch, count data. And this Penguin Watch program is a really good example of that. They take photos of penguin colonies in Antarctica all the time through a remote camera, and then people anywhere around the world can process and count the penguins, and they're finding out all sorts of interesting stuff. So that's sort of one level of citizen science. but there are different levels of citizen science, and so when, I don't know if that's actually working, it's not doing anything. So when you have the people coming in at just a particular time point in a project, they're not fully integrated into all aspects, and they're certainly not making decisions on how the project runs, and they're not coming up with the idea. So a more extreme form of citizen science is participatory or collaborative science, and that's where the idea could actually be coming from the community. They could be running the project in partnership with scientists, and they're certainly involved right from the idea through to the dissemination of the research, whether it's publicly or in journal articles. So a question for you, has anyone been involved? Kate, you have to put up your hand. David, a few, and yes, of course, the Rewa project as well is a good example, in a citizen science project. So some of you, but not too many of you, keep your hand up if that was in a professional capacity. Put your hand up if that was in a personal capacity. Okay, that's interesting, thank you. So, this Curious Minds document or plan that I alluded to has a few outcomes that it wants to achieve, and so at its heart we want this better engagement with science and technology across all sectors of New Zealand, but it's based on three sort of key aspects. We want sort of better integration into the education system of what we call science, technology, engineering and maths, or STEM. We want a more engaged science sector who are more willing to talk to the public, and we want the flip of that, the public more engaged with science and technology. And the platform that the participatory science platform I'm running spans across all three of those aims. So the really exciting thing about this platform is that it's really locally relevant science that those communities are doing, and it's highly collaborative. And it really is an absolute pleasure to be a part of this pilot. When I get to meet the projects on the ground, and I'll quickly flick over a few of them in a minute, it literally means that you walk away from that interaction with your heart kind of singing and your soul full, because you have so much to learn from these communities about how they can solve their own issues and the meaningfulness to them of being involved. So it's based on the principles of working together, two-way engagement, which we heard a bit of about this morning, innovative approaches to solving local issues, all through this platform. And it's, in terms of the criteria of what we're looking for, we call it the three-legged stool, or Sir Peter Gluckman does. So projects have to have pedagogical rigour in them, so educational merit, and usually there's a school or an educator should be embedded within the project to help facilitate that. They've got to have some robust science as part of them. They have to be asking a question that they can then test and answer. And it has to be based on this two-way engagement, this absolute partnership between community, scientists and educators. So where is this pilot being trialled? It's just in 3 regions as of yet. So it started last year and it's carrying on through this year as well. So South Auckland, Taranaki and Otago. They each have their own organisation running it. And what we're doing in this pilot process is we're testing it, we're looking at what works, what doesn't work so well. Very much we're co-creating everything together from the bottom up and from the top down approach. And we're looking at what will happen next. What I can't give you promises over, unfortunately, is that the pilot will extend beyond this year and extend into more regions. We're in an evaluation process at the moment to help determine that, and my fingers are firmly crossed that this will be an ongoing thing. So just to give you an idea of the kind of projects, in South Auckland last year we had projects looking at stream and lake restoration, the impact of drinking kava on the Tongan community, a cluster of early childhood centres looking at air pollution and development of a device that they can use in their centres that the little ones can both work themselves and also understand the science that's coming out of it, which is pretty impressive. We also had the FART project, which was about a zero waste initiative on a Marae and looking at the methane and which method of composting generates the most methane. And that might be of interest, Joe, for you with your Marae activities as well. We had a stream restoration where there'd been a major dye spill, purple dye, and looking at the impacts of that sort of disaster. 2 years later, when you put a foot in the mud and then released it, there was still purple dye just oozing out everywhere, and that had had a pretty profound effect on local stream life. Also mean the kids couldn't really go in the water. Then we've got lots of biodiversity monitoring projects, especially in Taranaki, where they're looking at kiwi programs. They're looking at marine mammal and seabird spotting along the coastline, but I can see that this concept of this project could easily be modified into some kind of emergency management type project as well. Looking at building bat homes and then testing them to see whether they work for the bats. So you can see a lot of them are very conservation focused at the moment. But this one, Te Moeone, is really interesting because it's a marae growing through their community garden, heirloom vegetables that are resilient to that particular soil, and they want to, foster that longevity of keeping those vegetables in the area and also understanding their nutrition properties more. And then we've got a reef monitoring project which was started by a scuba diving club, which I think is really neat, 3 nautical miles offshore, and another one that's based on looking at the health of kaimoana around the Waitra reefs in Taranaki. And this is relevant because they do a lot of collecting of kaimoana there, but they often have runoffs, periods when there's a lot of pollution that come out along the sea through the river there. Then in Otago, we've got dredging of the harbour and its impacts there, lagoon health and counting how many penguins and looking at moths across Otago. There's been just some new ones funded this year as well, and so there's one on building an electric car, one at looking at off-the-grid electricity in a school in Taranaki, and can they go off the grid, and what's the most efficient means for them to do that. So again, I think that's relevant in the space here. I pretty much want to finish by playing this wee video that talks about what these projects mean to the communities that are involved in them.
So the thing I love about projects like this one is that once we've finished, all the work that we do from start to the end creates relationships between ourselves and the people that come onto the projects. We call it whanaungatanga. When I was watching it before, it was warming my heart, and it's sort of one of the values I hold quite close to my heart because it means that we're connecting and also that we almost become family because of what we're doing together with the project, and then when we sit down to eat, everyone just opens up. And
so the really amazing thing about that particular project, or those projects in Taranaki, is that there were people that were working on their own individual project, but now they're working across 3 of our participatory science projects. And those projects are coming together as an integrated network, which is amazing, and helping mentor each other through their individual questions that they're asking. And we're starting to do that between the regions now as well, where we have similar projects occurring. So I think it's a really amazing concept. Like I said, I can't guarantee that it's going to be rolled out to Wellington, say, or that we're going to get ongoing funding. I hope that we do. But this approach could be taken into the emergency management space as well. And one of the things in my role as national coordinator is I'm building a lot of networks and helping people in or out of our program elevate their capacity. And so I'm more than happy to have discussions with you about how you could utilise this approach, because I think it's highly beneficial. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much on that. And just an observation from the Orewa walk, Tsunami walk. The high school had their media studies students making a documentary. It had some maths classes with measuring the time they walked. So I think there are science opportunities in the emergency management civil defence space, even within every school, with every science program, within the arts and humanities. It's happening already, and there are opportunities to enhance that. So children are learning in different ways in schools all the time, and I just think there are opportunities to enhance that in connecting to some of your community-based programs. So we've got a little bit of time now, about 12 minutes, and we'll put the questions up that had the votes, but we might just make sure we spread them around in the time we have. So if we could put the questions on the main screen, we'll be able to see that. Can we do that? It's on its way. Okay. It's coming, I believe. Okay. So I might just go for the highest votes, but we'll move around to hopefully get each per question. So, Craig, so given that all the NGOs are working in communities, how do they talk to each other, and how can you share some of that, especially when funding is being sought by many groups?
Well, the question, of course, drives right to the heart of a community organisation like Rotary, which builds relationships within its members by working together. We do have a long history of working with other organisations such as Lions. In fact, my club now is celebrating the 20th year of our tennis club with the local Lions partner club. And we've won it 19 times, but that's not the Rotary way, you know. It is a real issue that we find that we're so involved in our projects, and we're volunteers. So, you know, the average Rotarian is leaving their business to go home, you know, perhaps then rushing out to a meeting and late at night, and often then putting time in after that. So it is a situation where we do have difficulty reaching out. Now we have a lot of, having said that, if you talk about any of the other NGOs, whether it's Red Cross to the City Mission, you can, or Habitat for Humanity, you'll see that Rotary normally has had projects with them, but it's project-based is the answer.
Thank you. Next set of questions. Can we go back? Okay. We'll go to the next one. So, this is for Joe. Oh no, we've gone to David. Okay, sorry.
I didn't give the microphone away quick enough. So the answer I'll give to this question about how can I say that we're not doing regional level work when we've got responsibility for animal welfare is that typical government thing saying it's a different piece of the puzzle. So I wasn't covering all of MPI's emergency management responsibilities, which cover food safety, biosecurity, animal welfare, you know, floods, droughts, a whole lot of stuff. What I was talking about is more the recovery part, less on the response side. So yes, we do lead responses in animal welfare, and we are building a regional network. It didn't exist before, so we are having to build it, but it is being built. What I was talking about was more the community resilience part and the recovery part, and what we do with a focus on rural communities and people and families, less on some of the other pieces of that puzzle. So in that space, for example, recovery from floods, we will not be able to be setting up regional-based rural recovery groups in each region to look after sort of flood responses to that sort of thing. So floods and most natural hazards are still led by emergency management, and that's entirely appropriate, and we will continue that. And I guess what we're saying is that part of that is you probably want to have a rural network as part of your response to that, and we need to build that. So hopefully that explains it. It's that typical thing. It's a different piece of the puzzle.
Thank you. Next question is for Joe. So what is the level of understanding and practice of community resilience across Aotearoa amongst other iwi and Marae? Is there a register of iwi engagement with local emergency management resilience? But that might speak to a national program that they have plenty of, but I'll let you have the...
With regards to the community resilience across iwi, that's really regional based. Our focus with what we do here in Wellington is purely for this area. So the matrix, the setup, and the resilience programs we run here, they're way different to the other groups that we have. Even our neighbours over in Porirua, their needs and desires are different. So it's not like our marae to tell the next marae how to run things, but more work within our own groups to work out what is it that we need to do to help our councils to become resilient against a disaster. And I've got a whole file of answers for that question, but to speak for another region, we just won't do that. But we can offer ideas what we do for them to create policies and procedures around what they need to do. With regards to the second question there, to engage with their local emergency community resilience, we started doing that the day we were set up by our group to work with Wellington City Council, Hutt City Council and Te Puni Kōkiri, and to identify immediate needs. And out of that, we came up with a wish list on what we would like to see manifested into each marae in our group. And high on that list were water tanks. Water tanks. One of the things we found that happened in Christchurch was a lot of people down there did not have water. And that's one of the primary ingredients that every family should have in their house. Thankfully, there's a national drive around making sure our families, I'm saying families, because that's where the biggest group collective is really worked around. For our maraes, we have huge community sub-networks that permeate around the maraes in meetings, funerals, birthdays, on a grand scale, on a regular basis. We have, just down the road from us, our school, which has 3 35,000 litre tanks. That's fine, but that's half a mile down the road for the marae to access and to help dish out. So ours is to have our own networks properly prepared and set up to have those facilities ready for us to dish out immediately. Our maraes are activated. Power generators was another one, and tools to help prepare our maraes for whatever the situation is around those areas. So what we do in our group is constantly attend workshops, training sessions to bring us up to par with current trends, events. There's some practices that we used to do 30 years ago, they don't apply anymore. So we work our way forward to modify our practices and our procedures to account for what our immediate needs are. Hope that's answered the question.
Thank you. So we'll try and find a question for Kate. Where's the... Okay, we'll go to... where are we? There was one, yes, yes, the 3-vote one. So will there be regular face-to-face spaces to create through EC Lab for these projects and agencies to update lessons learned?
Currently, we're in the process of developing a lab, so this will be a space at the National Aquarium where we can have researchers come in and actually hot desk in the area and actually share the stories there. We also have project updates available on the blog, on the website, so researchers can update what they're doing and tell a little bit of story behind the work that they're doing. We also so in terms of, we've got the face-to-face spaces, and then we're also looking at developing kind of like a researchers forum so they can all come together and look at what projects are going on and to kind of guide a research strategy around that.
Thank you. And the last question we'll try, is there one for Curious Minds? Oh no, so no one's asked you any questions. So we'll call it quits there. But just before we go, I've been asked if we could have a speaker from the Bay of Plenty. You're going to come up and say a few words about which relates to what Joe was saying, about a national initiative to share knowledge around Marae. So I was asked if we could squeeze in a little time for a plug. So you can introduce yourself, I'm sorry.
Hi, crikey. Hi, I'm Angela Reid from the Bay of Plenty Emergency Management Group. It was just a quick plug, really. For those of you who are not aware, we had resilience funding to develop a Marae Preparedness Toolkit, which, Joe, you were involved with talking to Megan, our colleague, so thank you for your input into that. That's being launched on the 20th of June. So if anybody wants to catch up with Megan and myself over lunch to talk about the toolkit, we're here. But it's a resource for CDM to engage with Marae. And then there's a toolkit, a resource pack with plans and resources for the Marae. It's really, really cool. And that comes out, and it's a national product. It's not branded with our logo, it's for all of us. So that's out on the 20th of June. So watch this space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just want to thank the speakers again for the session of sharing a number of initiatives, activities that are happening, and really just helping grow the discussion about how communities can be part of, can create and lead activities that build resilience. So thank you for the 5 speakers.